fellow astrologer, and welcome back to D0, the planets in Western astrology. In this video, we're going to kick off the entire D series when we talk about what are all the planets, luminaries, and points of interest. Then we'll show about how they connect on the Keyring down here on the planets, and then we'll come back and read about the interesting facts. In astrology, the planets, luminaries, ascendant, sun, and moon, and points of interest like Chiron and midheaven are the primary actors on the cosmic stage. Each represents a different force or function within the human experience. The planets are seen as archetypical energies that govern specific domains: communication, love, action, growth, discipline, transformation, and beyond. The ascendant, the sun, and the moon, while not technically planets, are called luminaries because of their major symbolic role in identifying the emotions. Points of interest, such as midheaven, north node, and Chiron, offer key insights into your path, wounds, and purpose. Together, these celestial marks form the core vocabulary of a birth chart, each one coloring how and where different energies manifest in your life. Okay, so like all our videos, we have a set of interactive links where you can click on the link to actual Google and research the topic there, or you can come over to the side where you have the letter and the number and go to the actual video, just like this one, where we talk about the topic and go over it in more detail. Now let's go over what all the planets, luminaries, and points of interest. First of all, we have the luminaries, the ascendant, the sun, and the moon. We call them the luminaries because traditionally the sun and the moon are the luminaries because they shed light and they don't retrograde. But the ascendant is thrown in there because the two of them together paint a very good picture of what your superego, and your id is. What your superconscious, your conscious, and your deep subconscious. And we'll get into more details as we break down the three luminaries when we talk about them in the future videos. You also have the inner planets. These are slow-moving planets: Mercury, Venus, and Mars. We call them the inner planets because they're right there close to the Earth before you get to the asteroid belt. These planets move real fast. Mercury and Venus move faster than the Earth, so they tend to always be within either 30 degrees or 45 degrees from the sun, depending on which planet we're talking about when you're looking at any chart. But Mars is the one that kind of moves around on its own. Sorry, moves half as fast as the Earth does when it's making its journey around the sun. Now we get the mid-planets, Jupiter and Saturn. The mid-planets are all known as the major benefic and malefic. They have a lot of power on beneficial things and also limiting things. And we'll get more into that when we talk about those planets. And then you get into the outer planets. The outer planets are also known as the generational planets, or planets that were found later on. The original 7 planets were planets that were seen by the naked eye that astronomers saw back in ancient times. But once we had telescopes and discovered these other planets, they were added in later on. They're slower, they have different effects on things, and they seem to be more like a generational effect, more so than individual things. Sometimes they can have some more profound meanings on your other planets, but we'll get into that when we talk about transits. The outer planets are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Now let's talk about the point of interests. You have the North Node, the part of fortune, Chiron, midheaven. And the last thing we'll talk about are what are the dignities, which are the planets' rulers, exalted, fall, and detriment, which brings the whole sum up of all the planets. So now let's talk about how they connect over here on the Keyring. Right here we have all of the planets in order with their symbols. One thing we do mention a lot is when you get into the reading of the chart, you're going to want to take some time to memorize all these symbols. And these symbols here as well for the signs. There's also some symbols for the angles that we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into the F section, which is angles. An interesting thing, a pattern we want to show you, the luminaries start here. Aside from the ascendant always starts here, but that's considered a luminary by us for a different reason. But the main traditional luminaries, the sun and the moon, start here. And as you see, they go around. The Mercury is here and here. Also, Venus is here and here. But then, when you look here, you see the traditional ruler, Mars, for Scorpios here. But now they talk about Pluto, so they've updated that. But you can see Mars is here. You also go over here, you see Jupiter was traditional ruler for Pisces, but now that's upgraded now to Neptune. And over here, Saturn used to be the traditional ruler for Aquarius. They went around both sides linearly, evenly in the original astrology, but since they've upgraded, they've added these new planets along here. So that's an interesting thing. And we'll get into more about shared planets and stuff about that when we talk about the individual planets themselves, who they were shared, and signs that they used to share too, as we get more into the detail for these individual planets. Interesting facts about the planets, luminaries, and points of interest. Chiron, the lunar nodes, and the midheaven are technically not planets, but points of interest due to their symbolic power. So, all of these points of interest have a symbolic power that happen. The north nodes are actually nodes of the north and south node of the moon, and they talk about the path of destiny. The part of fortune is actually calculated by the ascendant plus the moon minus the sun. It's all based off the degree they make, and it'll tell you exactly where your part of fortune is. Chiron is an actual asteroid that travels around. It's the wounded healer. So the midheaven is actually this point right here, much like the ascendant. It's determined when you actually find out what the ascendant is. The midheaven is always the 10th house right here, which also corresponds to the descendant and the midnight. This is where midnight is. This is where mid-noon is. This is where the sun goes down, and this is the morning. This is the dawning sun. It shows the different points around the earth. Chiron itself is an asteroid, and it's how the asteroid flies itself. It can end up in any one of these things. It doesn't rule any house or any kind of sign or anything like that. And then the dignities itself, we'll talk a little bit more on at the end. It's kind of a sum up where it talks about the ruler, the exalted, the detriment, and the fall, which are some of the positive and negative signs that sometimes you'll find for every single planet. Some of them have more adversity in certain signs, and some of them just naturally do better in other signs. But we'll talk about that in the dignities in D16. So, each planet rules at least one sign and often a specific house. Traditionally, astrology includes only 7 visible planets. So, that's what we were talking about earlier, about the 7 visible planets that are originally in astrology, that later on when they had telescopes, they were able to discover the other planets that you couldn't see with the naked eye, and those were added in later. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to those planets individually in the outer planets. But right down here, you'll see that all of the rulers are all set up for each house and planet. So these are the corresponding planets to their rulers. All of these. Okay, some points, like the ascendant, midheaven, and part of fortune, are calculated from charts and are angles based and not planetary. So that reiterates what I was saying earlier. These angles right here, which are calculated when they actually find your ascendant, the midpoint and the ascendant don't necessarily have a ruler per se. You'll find out that whenever they get a sign, whatever that sign is, takes over the flavor for the ascendant. The ascendant moves every 2 hours. It changes from one sign to the next. So it's the fastest changing thing in your chart, which will be ascendant. So that's why it's really important to know exactly what time you were born and where, because it can change just minutes later. It depends on where you are along that sign. So it's a big part to figuring out what your houses are as well. The midheaven talks a lot about career and fortune. And the part of fortune, well, that talks about lucky things and things that happen in your life. We'll get into all those a little bit more when we touch on those topics on the individual videos right here. So that pretty much sums up the planets in Western astrology. In our next video, we're going to talk about the ascendant in D1. So stay tuned for that in our next series of videos. We hope you have enjoyed this video from our Astrology Keyring series. If you like the content, please like, follow, and share with your friends. Thank you for watching and have a blessed journey.